and welcome to a special edition of the Dirt NFCA podcast. We are going to be talking to a group of exemplary coaches and women and leaders, and this is just going to get really fun. And I can't wait for you to hear their stories and how they all connect with each other in a number of different ways. And the best way to do that is for me to stop talking and let them start. So we're going to go in order of my screen here. So Sheilah, Gulas, you get to go first. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you coached, your involvement with the NFCA, and we'll just kick it around the horn here.
Okay, awesome. I'm Sheilah Gulas, and I started my career in Division III at Allegheny College and Wittenberg University, and then finished my career at Ashland University. And during the early days, I was on the NCAA Division III softball committee, and I also have served on the board as the Division III rep and the first vice president, and also recently the Emeriti board. So have been involved with the NFCA for over 35 years, have loved every moment of it, have been in a lot of different roles, and have met some amazing people. So thank you for having us on the call today.
You bet. Thank you very much. Marge, you're up next.
Okay. This is Marge Willadsen, and I started my coaching career at Buena Vista University and stayed there for 28 years. And I was an original member of the NFCA. So that would be about 40 years ago. And remember the small meetings we had in Omaha, Nebraska. And now we've really expanded and gone big time with Las Vegas and the major hotels. I served on numerous NCAA committees and in the NFCA with the rating, the championships, the rules, helped write the rule book several years. And that was a lot of fun, controversy over jewelry. I can remember that. And now I'm a Emeriti and retired and living in sunny Arizona.
Nice.
Thank you very much. And several of us are jealous of sunny Arizona, but appreciate that. Deb, you're next.
Hi, this is I'm Deb Pallozzi. I just recently retired from Ithaca College. I started my coaching career at Albany State back when it was Division III, went on to RPI, and then ended up at Ithaca as a grad assistant, and then was in the right spot at the right time and got hired as the head coach back in 1989. As far as NFCA, I was the chair of our All-America committee for, it felt like eternity at times, like 5-6 years, I think, on the committee, on the top 25. June Walker was my mentor, especially on the top 25. And actually, she taught me how to get All-Americans for your region. I just followed her script. She had a great script, and I thought, well, if I'm going to get anybody from our region, that's the script I need to follow. And I need to thank Sheilah for getting me involved in the NFCA. When I first started, I really, didn't really know about the NFCA, and she gave a call and said, you got to do this, this, and this. Okay, I will. And I did, and then I got involved. So because of Sheilah, I got involved, and I think my first time going was joining, I'm not even sure of the first year I joined. It probably 90, 91. I don't know. And I was on NCAA committees as well. Chair of our region. Yeah, all those things. And I enjoyed every moment of it as well. It was a blast.
Thank you, Coach. And you can't talk NFCA without talking Lacy Lee Baker. So Lacy Lee, thank you so much for joining us. Hey, your turn. A little bit more people probably know you than you think, but a little bit about you in case somebody's listening that doesn't.
Okay. I started with intercollegiate athletics, working at San Diego State and Stanford in sports information. I went from there and worked for the NCAA. Started in 1985 and worked there through 1991. And we had the joy of working with the softball committee. At that time, it was just one committee, which had Division I, Division II, Division III people on there. And then left there and took a little time off with my newborn daughter. And then I became executive director of the NFCA in 1994, I believe, and I worked there for 21 years. So I've had quite the joy of working with all these wonderful people here for many, many years.
Thank you very much. Sharon, you're up next.
I'm Sharon Panske. I started my career at UW Oshkosh, and kind of like Deb, was kind of in the right place at the right time. I volunteer coached after I graduated, and then our head coach retired, or yeah, I guess you could say retired from coaching, because our position was not full-time, and she was teaching full-time at a high school that was an hour away, and her high school made her make a decision after 3 years if she was going to coach or teach. And well, when it's a 0.5 position, 0.4 position, you're not going to stay there. You're going to stay where you have good benefits and you've been for a long time. So I was in the right position at the right time, and I was there for 18 years. Currently, I am the only, I believe, working person on this call, except for you, Joanna. But I am currently an athletic trainer in Richland Center, Wisconsin, working for the Richland Hospital, and cover outreach athletic training at the local high school. I joined an SCA in, I think it was 1986. So I've been, since I left coaching, I've been a mayor type person with the association since. So I've been involved for over 30 years, like Sheilah. I was on the NCAA softball committee. I was one of those 3 people that was on the committee, but wasn't on the committee back in the day when it was just the 3. I was in charge of our region, and then did that for, I don't know, it seemed forever. And then they actually divided the committees up, so each division had their own full committee. So I was asked to stay on the committee, and so I did, because we always had fun when we got together. So did that, and my first convention was the one in Atlanta in 1988, because it was a huge snowstorm in Atlanta. And they weren't giving cars to anybody, or flights weren't getting in. And I just told the rental car people, I'm from Wisconsin, give me the car keys. This is nothing. We drive in this all the time. So that was my first convention, and that's where I met Sheilah. And, you know, it's just been kind of a fun ride since, so I'm just doing the athletic training thing, but in July 1st, I will be retiring. So that will hopefully open up my schedule a lot to do a lot more things with these guys.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And it is hard to call this work. I mean, this is a lot of fun for me. So, but I feel you a little bit. These people going golfing here shortly. I don't get to understand that. But Willie, how about you? Last but certainly not least.
I'm Willie Rucker, and I started at Trenton State as a grad assistant with the famous June Walker. And obviously everything started with June Walker. And I feel completely honored to have that ability to go back in history with her, because she was an incredible leader and certainly pointed us in the right direction. We helped form the NFCA, or NSCA, I believe it was called at the beginning. And I remember driving around in one car with the board members and members, basically. And so I kind of started from there with Judy Martino and a lot of those old timers who certainly pushed hard to get our organization up and running. And again, honored to be tagging along and get that with that group of incredible women leaders. From Trenton State as a grad student, I went to Montclair State, Division III. Loved it there. And of course, June still mentored me and helped me throughout. And from Montclair, I moved west and went to an NAIA program. So was still involved with the NFCA through NAIA. And then from there, went back to the East Coast and North Carolina, where I retired from Appalachian State University and have been on various committees throughout. I still volunteer with the NCAA at the time and emeritus with the NFCA. Go out and work some championships in May, mostly, sometimes soccer, but I loved every second of it. I am retired now, thank goodness. I'm in the Keys currently for a few months. Tough life. I mean, it is rough today. We have 6 foot seas, so I can't take the kayak out. But anyway, love my life, love these women who are incredible leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know. Are we going to Arizona or the Keys? Where's the next trip? You know, I know you're coming to Louisville, but I vote Keys, and I will happily just come and chauffeur all of you wherever you want to go. But well, Lacy Lee, let's start with you. You know, we've heard a few comments of NCAA committee, and you were a big part of that. Can you explain for people who might not be sure, it used to be one committee, how that worked? What were some of the ways that this group worked together early on as part of the softball committee?
Yeah, as I said, there was only 12 people. There were 6 Division I members, 3 Division II, and 3 Division III. And they were responsible for all 3 NCAA championships for softball. And back in those days, I think if you go back and look at the bracket numbers, you're going to see a huge change over the years of how many teams were in the NCAA championships. I can't remember exactly. You all remember in Division III how many there were to start?
Yeah, there's 24.
16.
Oh.
Yeah, I believe it was 16.
24.
And I think it went to 20 and then to 24.
Yeah, and so there was a lot of work to be done because basically they had to figure out all these championships that the NCAA was running and just move forward, and then also think about how to add more teams. Like I remember when the NCAA Division I championship was 24 teams, and now it's 64. So just the expansion has been remarkable in softball. And then there were lots of other things. I mean, like once I moved on to the NFCA, and these were things that Rayla Allison had already started, were all-American teams. And those were very vital and a big draw for all these coaches to be members of the NFCA. And that was a very important piece of the puzzle to honor student athletes as well as coaches. So I think that has changed over the years too, as far as numbers and how many people are involved.
Absolutely. You know, Willie, one thing you said that made me wonder a little bit, you talked about the people who were originally responsible for getting in a room together and thinking this organization needs to happen. And I'm curious, when those conversations started, what was the sentiment around sharing? Just what you're doing well, how we can grow, the collaboration, working together. Was that a big piece? And I ask because we hear that all the time now from other coaches organizations. How do you get your people to share? How do you get your top coaches to speak at convention? How do you, and for me, I joined in 2002. I've never known anything else. It's such a culture of the softball community. Is that true early on? Walk me through those first meetings.
Yeah, well, there was still some battles about sharing, and some coaches didn't want to share their secrets, so-called. But I think Lacy Lee hit on it. It was honoring the student athletes. You know, how do we honor the student athletes the best? And honoring the student athletes is obviously going through how we're coaching them. And so they started thinking, oh, we do have very valuable information for younger coaches. We wanted to mentor more. Also, not just our student athlete. Well, we did want to mentor our student athletes and get them to coach. But it was that piece. And then also we wanted to pull in, I think it was also control somewhat. You know, we wanted to control our official groups.
so we could tell them what we wanted and work with them. So it wasn't necessarily control as much as working with each other and promoting our game. That was what we talked about a lot, was promotion of our game. How do we get more people involved? How do we promote our game as a fun game and a game that people might want to watch? And so, you know, ESPN started in on a little bit on the edge too. They started getting excited about televising games because their first game that they ever televised was in 1979, and it was delayed. You know, it wasn't live. It was delayed by several months. And so they wanted more involvement too, because they saw how much interest there was. And so there was the beginning of that. So I believe it started as promotion, and we want to bring our game up a level and continue to bring it up as high as we can bring it. So that's what we were sharing with other organizations too. And we were kind of looking at other organizations, basketball. We looked at basketball and volleyball to see how they developed their organizations. And so we just used other sports groups.
For sure. And they're both 1 year ahead of us. They're celebrating 40 years this year. We'll celebrate it next year. And I know that for a while, when I go back through the archives, I see, you know, joint baseball, softball convention or meetings
Right.
at baseball. Who wants to go first? Walk me through that decision of, no, we're done. We're going the softball route here. And how did that come about? And, you know, what were the opportunities, excitement? Anybody was scared about making that split, if you will? Who wants to jump in on that? Anybody remember?
Lacy Lee, probably you were involved in that, weren't you, when we split?
That was actually before my time. But I believe the reason they went with them in the first place was because with baseball was because of the exhibitors. Because there weren't that many people that were attending the NSCA convention, National Softball Coaches Association, back at that time. And so it was hard to draw exhibitors. So baseball had a lot of exhibitors. So I believe that was the thinking. And Sheilah, you would know, I mean, you were on the board. I don't know if you were on the board when they made that decision to split, but they did split eventually. And they went with the ASA too for a time, but I think that was before baseball, right?
Yeah.
I think it was with the ASA and then baseball.
What year are we talking? What time, when did that split?
It was the 80s. Yeah.
Yeah, the 80s. Yeah.
Well, I think
Because my first year, I went to Atlanta in '88. That was my first convention, and we were with baseball yet.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
I believe in my archives, and we'll see if this is true. 84, 85, 86 were meetings in Omaha. I believe
Right.
just softball, and then
With the nationals.
Yeah, in conjunction with the national championship. Yeah.
yes, and
Yeah.
then 87 and 88 were with ABCA. And then 88 was in Atlanta, and then 89 in San Francisco has no designation of being with anyone else. And then with ASA was 89 through 92. And then
Okay.
93 in Atlantic City was the first standalone. So I don't know if that helps jog the memories, or if those are stories we don't talk about either, Sharon. I'm not sure if we talk about those or not, but that's kind of the timeline as far as I have it.
Mm-hmm.
I think, go ahead, Sharon. Well, I think we got to remember the role that AIAW had back then. The first championship we ever went to was, I think, in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it was AIAW, and we were all in one classification. So I remember having opening up against Slippery Rock, and they were D2, we were D3. And it was everybody in one spot, all playing at the same time, basically. And we didn't have a convention. But then as softball kind of started to gain a little success and maybe a little TV exposure coming along, then NCAA got involved. And then I believe it was 1984 that NCAA officially started organizing and sponsoring a lot of women's sports, especially softball. And so I think a lot of us, when we started with AIAW, we didn't have a lot of money for travel. They didn't they didn't give our teams travel money. They weren't on TV. We didn't have a lot of perks or anything to go along with it. So NCAA kept looking better and better because our institutions, of course, wanted some financial help for travel and so forth. And so there was a lot of jumping from AIAW over to NCAA. And from there, you know, it's history. NCAA took it over and gave us a chance really to grow and promote and make things, I think, probably maybe more exciting, not exciting maybe, but just more perks, you might say, more organization. They had more people, more money. AIAW was a wonderful organization. And I think we hated to see it go away. And I guess in that realm, once we get talking about Title IX, we got to talk about Dr. Christine Grant at some point and her influence, and Betty Hoff. Betty was the person who got me involved a lot, and we always called her Little Betty. She was a lot like a June Walker. And so I owe her a lot for getting me involved. So I don't know. I just don't want us to forget AIAW because they started women's athletics.
Absolutely. And no reason to wait on that, Marge. We can dive in. I think that's a great point. And I always felt so privileged to have the mentors I had, and Margot Juncker and Joanne Graff, and you know that I learned those things. And I think it's so important for, you know, our coaches today to continue teaching their student athletes about the history, whether it's the people, the teams, the geographic locations, the organizations, whatever it might have been. And hopefully this gives some opportunity for coaches who might not know themselves, you know, to learn and have faces and real people they can reach out to and learn more. But let's go around again and talk about the first thing maybe you think of when someone says Title IX to you. What's the first name, the first story, the first experience that just pops in your head, and we'll go from there. But we can go backwards order this time. Willie, do you want to go first? And just what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Probably with Title IX was the fact that we would start getting scholarships somewhat. Student athletes were finally given that opportunity to have a scholarship. So people who weren't going to get to play got to play a little bit more. Also inclusion, we began to see the sports come about. I think when it really came about, I was in high school. And so our high school had to start volleyball, and we were already allowed to do track and field. And I grew up in Texas, so I always had basketball, but not softball, not volleyball, not a lot of things. And so with Title IX, that really gave us a way to play, not just with Parks and Recreation, which we also had in Texas. I was pretty fortunate for that. And the rodeo team, I got to be on the rodeo team. Yeah, with Title IX, we actually got to compete finally on a very competitive basis. And there were a lot of women out there, young women who were outstanding athletes, and they were given those opportunities to play.
Thank you very much. Sharon, how about you? What's the first thing you think of?
I kind of, my first experiences with Title IX were in high school, because it was my time in high school when all that, just after that had kind of all started. But we have a 2-year campus here in Richland Center, so I was interviewed by a couple kids that had to do a report on Title IX, and Lacy Lee and I were talking about this yesterday. And you know, we had one locker room. The boys had a varsity locker room and a Phi Ed locker room. Of course, the weight room was off of the varsity locker room for the boys. And they had a closet that used to be a closet where they had a universal machine that we'd use for Phi Ed class. And we would go, a couple of my friends and I, we'd go in there after school when we weren't in a sport, and we would lift. Well, one of the supervisors in the weight room wouldn't let us lift because we were girls and it was unhealthy for us. So we went and talked to one of our Phi Ed teachers, and Mr. Potterton was our hero. And he came out, he goes, what's the problem? He goes, well, they want to lift and it's not healthy for girls to lift. And he goes, if they want to lift, they can lift. There's nothing wrong with that. So we think we won the big war. We got to lift on the universal weight machine that was really not very good. And then, you know, come home basketball games, the boys visiting team came and took the girls' locker room, and the boys had their varsity room. Why they needed our locker room, we don't really know, because they had another boys' locker room that they could use, but they had to use ours. So we said, you know, why don't we have a varsity room, a varsity locker room? So they took the back 2 rows of the varsity girls' locker room, and we're going to make us a team room. And we're thinking, cool, we'll have our own little room. This will be awesome. It'll be better than nothing. Well, what they did is they put new lockers in, and then they put this beautiful floor to ceiling cage in, just like wire fence cage with a door that locked. So we always said that, well, it's time to go to our cage for a couple hours so we can do stuff. So they still put the visiting team in the girls' locker room with us at the back of the locker room, and they were at the front of the locker room, so you could hear what everybody's saying to each other for at halftime of games and stuff. So it was like, really? What's the purpose of this? So we always said we were caged animals. So that's kind of the first thing I think of. And sadly, at the university when I was there, as not only as a student, but it was kind of the same situation. You know, we had a locker room, the guys had a locker room, and they would always take the girls' locker room for the guys, but the women had to share the same locker room. It's like, this isn't fair. Why can't they have that locker room and we have this one? So you know, a lot of the similarities from that time to the university really crept in. And, you know, it wasn't until 97, I think it was, that we finally got our own field. We were playing on an intramural field that had a fenced backstop. And the rest of when I was playing, we had no sideline fences at all, none. We just had a backstop with park benches as our dugouts. And then my last 2 years, our coach at least got us snow fencing. So we had snow fencing down the lines just past first and third, and then snow fence in the outfield. But we'd get kicked off our game field for intramurals that started at 5 o'clock because it was an intramural field. But baseball had their own facility, their own everything, dugouts, locker rooms, the whole shebang, and never had to worry about getting kicked off their field for anything. So yeah, we've come a long way, thank goodness.
and yet still worrying about one weight room machine in some regards, right? I mean, a year ago, that's what kind of started this most recent
absolutely
interest. And so
absolutely.
On one hand, you think we've come all this way, and then I'm sure many of you are going to share stories of, but have we, you know, and some different things. But Lacy, what about you? When you think of Title IX, what comes to mind?
Well, for me, I graduated high school in 1973, and when I was in high school, grew up in Jackson, Mississippi. There was one women's sport in our public schools, and that was women's tennis or girls' tennis. And so I played that, but my dad was the sports editor of one of the Jackson, Mississippi papers. And so I had grown up going to games. I mean, from the time I was a baby all the way to then, I covered the SEC with my dad, you know, but it was always men's sports. There were never any women's sports. And I used to be so mad that I could never play anything. I played church league basketball. But for me, Title IX meant something to me when it was enacted, but it still took so long. Like I never had any real coaching. And when I went to college, I went to Delta State University, and they had women's basketball. That was it. But at least they were able to start the women's basketball team because of Title IX. And I tried out for the team. I just played church league and I got cut immediately. I was terrible. But besides the lack of athletic ability, I think it was also the lack of coaching. You know, I never really had a coach. And but anyway, I had the honor and was able to be a part basically of that women's basketball team, going to a lot of games and all that. And I don't know if you've seen this documentary that just was nominated for an Oscar about Lucy Harris, who was the star basketball player for Delta State. Delta State won 3 women's national basketball championships. That was AIW days. But I used to write the first championship that they played in, that they won, was 1975, and my dad had me as a stringer. So I wrote the stories, and I would go to the games and I'd write the stories for my dad's paper. But so anyway, that's kind of how I got into journalism. But anyway, so fast forward, I never had the opportunity to play. It just made me mad. I wanted to get into women's athletics because I wanted women and girls to have an opportunity to play. I just didn't think it was fair. And so fast forward again, I had Nikki Miller, and back then her first, that's my daughter, our first sport obviously was softball and was t-ball. And at that time I was executive director of the NFCA, and Rayla Allison had left these visors in the office that said Title IX, it's the law. And so when Nikki started playing t-ball, I made her wear that visor, Title IX, it's the law. So some of the other parents weren't too happy about that. And then when it was photo day, this one mom wanted me to put on the visor like all the other little boys and girls had. Don't you want Nikki to look like all the other boys and girls? I went, nope, I want her to wear Title IX, it's the law. So I was glad that she was able to experience what Title IX brought, you know, that she was able to play.
Do you have that picture? Do you have that picture of Nikki?
I do.
I need that. Will you send that?
Sure.
We need that. That is fantastic, and I think that's amazing on so many different levels. So please share that. That is awesome. Okay. Deb, how about you? What are the things you think of? What comes to mind?
Well, I have a few little snippets. I can remember growing up when I was like 6, and my dad was the playground counselor because that's what we had. We had playgrounds. We didn't have anything really organized back then. So, but he organized everything. He had leagues for the guys, for basketball and for all this stuff. And I just remember sitting there like on top of a basketball, wondering why I couldn't play. I remember asking him, Dad, why can't I play? Why can't, he goes, you're a girl. I'm like, yeah, I know, but why can't I play? The girl thing that didn't resonate. So fast forward a little bit, high school, and I graduated in 75 from high school. So in high school in 73 was when we first had athletics at all for girls. And I can remember, okay, everybody, I was a cheerleader because that was the only thing you could do. You know, that was, I don't know, that was remotely athletic. You know, we had nothing. And I can remember in 73 doing both. I was both playing basketball and, you know, running Melver and then being the cheerleader for the boys. And then in 74, I had to make this major decision. Was I going to be a cheerleader or was I going to stay in basketball? I couldn't do both anymore. And it was really a major one because back then, when girls in athletics, that was really a negative, it had a very negative stereotype. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't anything positive back in the Northeast anyways, where I grew up. So it wasn't that I wanted to cheerlead. I wanted to play basketball. That's my love. I just wanted to play, but I had to decide, did I want to go through the stuff I was going to go through, but I may be made fun of, and, you know, I was the jock and that. So I just said, yeah, I just wanted to have fun. And I enjoyed it. I was so at home on the court or on the field. It was just an amazing feeling. I remember the first day. I remember the first day playing. I remember getting the balls and shooting up in the gym. but, you know, a lot came with like a lot with Sharon, you know, we had to practice 8 o'clock at night after varsity and JV boys, you know, practice, and we could get to practice, or we could practice in the cafeteria, because that was the room that was available to the girls back then. The uniform we would have was one. We had one uniform because, you know, they picked up all these sports now. So we had one uniform. It was this one piece short and shirt thing with a number on the back. And we wore that for, you know, the fall sport, you know, for winter sports, whether it was volleyball or basketball, and then for softball in the spring. And I was in a history class, you know, my senior year. And I can remember just saying, why weren't we able to have different uniforms for the different sports? And then this one guy in our class was complaining about his baseball uniform, because back then they were wool. So they had the wool uniforms, and it was really, really hot for him. And I just looked down, I go, you've got to be kidding. Are you really complaining that you have a wool uniform? Try wearing your phys ed uniform for all 4 sports and see how you feel about that. So we got into a little fight at the history class. And I can remember the history teacher going, okay. I go, no, really. I go, I wear this one piece little thing with a number on the back that for every sport. And Gabe is worried about his woolly, you know, uniform, but at least it's a baseball uniform, pants and a shirt, you know, that I go, so I guess my fight started back when I was a senior in high school. You know, you just realize that things that just aren't right. You know, some things are. I was just so thrilled to play my sophomore year, and then my junior year making that major decision to either cheerlead or play sport, not because I loved both. It's because it was the image that was portrayed, and then the stuff you had to go through a little bit back then when you were a female, you know, playing, you know, an athletic female. And then I was lucky enough to go to Cortland and play. But again, what the guys had and did was far different from what we had and could do. You know, they were taking spring trips and we were not. You know, they were doing some things that we couldn't do. And we were AIAW back then as well. And I just remember the differences that we had. It was very stark, you know, and our field was this little made up field, grass with a portable backstop with the wheels. You know, you wheel it and put it there, and, you know, it's at this backstop. At Ithaca, we still use it as a backstop for batting practice. But so the Cortland, that was our field, you know, no fence, like Sharon said, there was nothing. You know, you had the stake in bases that you pounded in and all that. So it was just so different. Everything was so different. And practice was, you know, wherever the space was available. It was just, you're always a little bit second class, and just the whole, it was just, and like in high school, it was an afterthought. We had to do it. It was law. All right, here you go. Here's your one uniform. Use it. At Cortland, it was, okay, here you go. Go play in the back there. We'll give you a backstop. You can pound in your bases and do your thing. So it was just always that kind of thing. And we were successful back then. We were, Cortland State has been good forever. And then you move forward. I can remember getting, you know, at the high school level and getting my first job at the high school level. We didn't have uniforms. I'm like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Why don't we have good uniforms? So I made sure we got some good uniforms, and just had to look. I mean, you got to look the part. So we look sharp. We look good. And then I went on to Missouri, University of Missouri in 81, still AIW. And I got to coach Teresa Wilson, actually. She was the sophomore pitcher at the time. And we finished 4th in the country at that time, in 81. And Willie was one of the top 3 pitchers in the country. And it was just, it was fun. But I can remember the women there. Now, Missouri, they had the Hearn Center. I'm sure they still have the Hearn Center. But the facility was pretty nice. It was skinned, you know, I wasn't used to that from Cortland. It was a skinned facility, and it was pretty good. And the golf course was just behind it. And I remember the golfers coming up. But and Jay, because Jay followed me. Yeah. So I can remember the women going into and out. I thought it was a beautiful locker room. It was carpeted, and they had, you know, radio piped in, and they got their stuff hung up in the lockers. I was like, geez, that never happened. This is cool. But they were complaining. And I was just like, wow, they go, yeah, but you see what the guys get. And I don't know what the guys get. I'm sure it was awesome. And I don't know. I don't even know where they played at the time. But I remember saying to the women, I go, listen, you need to be, you're getting everything. You get your laundry done. They get it hung up. You got music. You got carpet in your locker room. What is? You got the Hearn Center where you can play. We played games. We played opponents in the Hearn. So it's just like, wow. I can just remember just thinking how it all came about. And then when I got to, you fast forward all the different schools, but you get to Ithaca College. And at that time, our president and Donna Lopiano were on the Gender Equity Committee together, that back in the early 90s. And at that time, I was teaching, a gazillion, I was the assistant volleyball coach, head softball coach, and teaching a gazillion classes. And the baseball coach was doing baseball, not teaching as much, but he got full release time to run a fall program, to run his spring program. And I had volleyball. And if I wanted to run a fall program, then I could do then I could do softball maybe on a Sunday. So I tried to do that. And then we would pick up a game somewhere. So I was doing my expense report for fall games. And I was like, so I went to the administrative aide over in athletic building. And I was like, so where does this money come from that I just spent for this Sunday fall game? And she's like, well, I don't know. I mean, what line of my budget is this going to come out of? She goes, you don't have a line for that. I go, what? She goes, you don't have a line for that. I go, what's baseball? He goes, he has a line. I go, what? So that's my first real Title IX kind of like, besides fighting over the uniforms in high school, that was the eye opener. And then that's when we, as a coaching staff, a female coaching staff, Doris Kostrinski kind of led it. She was an icon in the sports, field hockey, and all the things that softball. She did. She was an icon for our program. So she kind of led the charge of, fighting for this little more equity within our coaching staff and equity for our female athletes and the male athletes, and kind of come it all together. It's a constant battle, and it's still not over. And I always used to tell my players, like, we'd go to certain schools and, the coaches would be they still do it, line the fields, they're just looking. I go, you guys, what we have at Ithaca now is not the norm. I go, it should be, but it's not. I go, what you're seeing right now with the athletes and the coaches doing the fields and doing all those things, that's more of the norm at many schools. And that's something you need to appreciate, but it's also something you got to fight for, because this isn't right. And that's what we need to continue fighting for. So that I always tried to teach my student athletes to, fight the fight, particularly the male, I'd have males helping me out, particularly the males, fight it. And I would tell the male coaches in our conference, fight it. They didn't like what was going on in their schools. I go, you, of all people, need to fight it. You played football at a school now you see what's going on. Fight it. Fight it. You got to fight. You got to continue the fight. And that's what I keep telling the coaches up at Ithaca. You got to continue it. You got to keep going.
Absolutely. Thank you. Marge, how about you? What are the first things you think of?
Well, I think about the scholarship opportunities for the student athletes. That they could finally now have that opportunity to have a real athletic scholarship. That's the first thing I thought of. And then, as Willie said too, you could finally have a real team, and maybe you could have a real uniform. I mean, I went through all the same things as Deb did with we had numbers on our pennies. That's what we wore in our gym suits. And I guess I was kind of a stay-at-home mom right during Title IX. And so I was kind of just staying at home. And when I finally did go back to actually just coach tennis at Buena Vista, the women actually were beginning to have teams and get to travel and do things. So I think, without even a push from Title IX, I think I think Division III schools are sometimes a little more worried about the government coming in and shutting off their funds than maybe a state institution. So I really felt like Buena Vista tried to help the women athletes quite a little bit. Of course, my field was like Deb's, portable backstop, throw down the bases. And that was just for 1 year. And then we started to share a field with the local Catholic high school. We had a guideline wire from the telephone pole down our left field line, but we just kind of ignored that. And if it hit off of that, it was a dead ball. But I think really the main significance is that Title IX gave us the scholarship, chance to travel, a chance to be a real team, and to begin developing a little bit of publicity for our student athletes. And as Deb said, there's still a ton of work to be done. I still hear a lot of discrepancies. And then you have to throw out Title IX and see what happens. But we can't give up the fight. It's just, I mean, I had all the same inequities that Deb did growing up in a little town in East Texas. The only time we could get in the gym was 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning to shoot baskets. And that was it. And even when I moved into Renton, Washington, we had a great intramural program, great sports days. We'd invite other schools to come and we'd play, but our teams would all be mixed up. And it wasn't until I went to Washington State University after I graduated, and that was 1966. So I'm kind of the old guard here, Joanna. And I felt, I mean, I was like in heaven because I got to play tennis, I got to play field hockey, and I got to play basketball. Even though we traveled in station wagons and we didn't have a full schedule, I still got to enjoy the chance to fly actually to Stanford and Cal Berkeley to play tennis. I mean, back in that day, that was pretty amazing. So I laud Washington State for giving opportunities to the women. They still don't have women's softball, however. So when Title IX came in to make it equity balanced, they added women's crew. And so they never have added softball. So every time they ask me to donate money, I say, well, when you get a women's softball team, I'll consider doing more. But right now, until you get that, I'm not going to do it. So I just think we've come a long way, no doubt about it, but we still have a long way to go. So
we send them a letter every year, Marge, of, hey, did you know this about softball? With the growth and participation in television, we send it to every school that we know of that doesn't have softball, but maybe we'll just keep plugging away. Maybe. Sheilah, how about you, Sheilah? What comes to mind when you think Title IX?
Well, it's rough right now going after everyone, because as each person spoke, I'm like, yes, check, yes, yes, yes. But to kind of take it a different direction, because I've got my stories that relate to every single thing that each person has talked about. But for me, as I look at Title IX, I'm kind of the lucky one, because I graduated from high school in '79. So I actually was able to receive a lot of the benefit of the fight that people before me. But I would definitely say that my thought of Title IX, other than what everyone else has said, is that I was blessed being around strong leaders and women leaders that paved the way for the opportunities that I had. My middle school phys ed teacher was also my basketball coach. And when I was a 7th grader, she would get her students that would be on her women's ASA modified, pitch team. And that was my team that I started in 7th grade. That was my travel team. And I played with a bunch of women phys ed teachers from all of the high schools in the community and in the county that I lived in Western New York. And so I'm playing with, 20, 25-year-old, professionals and strong women. And, that was my start. In high school, you know, we had great teams. She was my basketball coach. You know, we had amazing records. You know, softball was great. You know, the biggest thing is we were the Lady Trojans, because heaven forbid you be the Trojans. But, you know, and then I was blessed because she left the high school. Kay Gould was her name, and she went and became the head coach at Allegheny College while I was playing at Clarion, which was a Division II institution. And you know, it was tough for us playing at that level, but the thing about softball is sometimes softball gets screwed, but sometimes baseball does too. You know, I was at a university, and, you know, wrestling and football and, you know, swimming and all of those sports were going crazy. And baseball and softball was a second class citizen. Um, and so, you know, you can talk about Title IX, but a lot of those situations, you know, it was kind of equal treatment for all of us. But then I was fortunate to, you know, once I actually started my career, I started, you know, with Kay Gould fighting for all the things at Allegheny. I had the opportunity to go there and be her assistant. And then at that point in time, you know, I was meeting June Walker, Betty Hoff. I can remember the first convention I went to, you know, I met Betty, and she was like, "Hey, I'm going off these committees. I want you to take my place." And here I am, you know, a young coach, first year as a head coach, first year as, you know, coaching players at Allegheny that I played travel ball with on my women's modified team. You know, getting an opportunity to do some of these things, and, you know, June, and being with June Walker at the championships, and then spending time with her and the entire Trenton State group that filled our room at the conventions. And, you know, you look at the strong women that I was able to, you know, start my career with and admire, and just, you know, look at them as mentors. And, you know, that's hopefully what I try to do now, is I try to do the same thing. I try to be that person that someone, you know, can look up to, that can support that person that needs it, because I was blessed with so many great people, and blessed with so many things. You know, they were fighting the start of the battles of Title IX, and I had a lot of those opportunities because of what they fought for.
And I think there's so many people that others might not even know. You know, as I was talking to Rayla Allison last week, we talked about a lot of, you know, different people who were involved in Title IX and creating these opportunities. Marge's already mentioned Dr. Christine Grant recently passed away, was just a giant in the space, and some others. Who are people you think of right away, and you just want others to understand the debt that's owed, the gratitude, just the role that they were playing in it, that maybe you think they aren't as celebrated as they should be, or people that maybe someone listening should be Googling right now to learn a little bit more about and what they had done? Anyone come to mind for any of you?
Well, the biggest one, yeah, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Willie.
Of course, Rayla Allison, Judy Martino, June Walker. Those are some key ones. Betty Hoff, obviously. Marge Willadsen, Sheilah. Lacy Lee Baker really turned our organization around to one of our first full-time. Lacy Lee, weren't you the first full-time?
No, Rayla was, and she did it for
Rayla
3
was?
years. Yeah.
Okay, so between you and Rayla, that really made a huge difference in our organization when we hired a full-time director. But that was all those people, Betty Hoff and all of them talking and deciding what they were going to do and how we would get more into our membership too. So yeah, definitely. June Walker was influential for Division III, Rayla Allison, Division I, Judy Martino.
Linda Wells, Sharon Drysdale.
Linda Wells, yeah, Sharon Drysdale.
I mean, I remember like those early conventions, and I went went as the NCAA rep to the first few. I was there in Atlanta. That's where I met my husband my future husband for the first time. But I just to hear them talk, they were so good at debating the issues, and I think that's all those people through the years have just. I mean, we still have more and more leaders. It's the people that are the NFCA members that are the key, because they really love the sport. They're in it for the right reasons, and they're the ones that deserve the credit for the growth of softball, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Marge, you were gonna say?
I was going to say we need to throw in Judy Garman in this, and I wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was Deb maybe that mentioned Donna Lopiano.
Yeah.
She
Don
was
Lopiano, just not as big in softball.
Yeah, and did a lot for Title IX. And the one that she was my hero because I was into tennis back then a lot was Billie Jean King. And I think Billie Jean King and probably Christine Grant and Donna Lopiano did more for women's athletics in my mind than most anybody. And that's through all sports, not just softball. In fact, Christine Grant was, I think, the first true women's athletic director at a Division I institution. So they finally had a separate department for men and women. And so she was a pioneer in that area too. But I think those people helped softball get going as much as, the ones we've already mentioned within our sport.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Was it Judith Sweet that was like the first NCAA
president?
Yeah.
Female president.
See San Diego.
Yeah. She was good too.
Yeah. She was from Wisconsin.
Well, that makes her even better.
I thought it was pretty cool Sunday that Billie Jean King was the official coin flipper for the Super Bowl too.
She was? Oh, I didn't miss that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, and she got the 70th coin. Who got the first coin? Like, if you're the flipper, shouldn't you get the coin labeled coin number 1? Like, I just think, I'm sure it's the commissioners or somebody, but if you're doing the flipping, your coin should be coin 1, not coin number 70 of 1,000 or whatever. That's all I'm saying. I don't know. That's all I'm saying is I don't know where that came from, but it was a very cool moment. And they talked a lot about, Title IX had a great video montage, and that, to your point earlier, the male influence is crucial in the allyship and some of this. And Lacy Lee, we have a podcast coming up a little later with Jay and some other men in softball that were, helpful in doing certain things to advance the cause and just being great partners throughout all of this as well. But one question I want to make sure I ask you all too is, where are we still falling short? Because I'm sure your perspective has changed as now, you're not actively coaching, or, you're looking and you're thinking, I know we've done so much, but how is X, Y, or Z still acceptable? I think of the gender equity report that's come out recently, and a $10 million difference in funding for a national championship for baseball compared to a national championship for softball, and things that, we find ourselves in. But it's so much more. There's, youth level, and there's, all things. But what are some areas that you believe we should be further along than we are, or that you would really encourage coaches to evaluate what they are offered versus, maybe what they should be offered, not at anyone else's expense? Agree with you completely, Sheilah. Not as someone else, but this that is maybe falling short of where they should be. Anything come to mind for any of you all?
To me, it's like with coaches' salaries, like, well, we got to get this baseball coach because they've won this, and this. And well, softball's open, but we can this person looks pretty good. And it's almost like you're a second-class citizen. And hopefully that is changing a little bit, but it's, I know when I was at Oshkosh, I was less than part-time. I was a head softball coach and assistant volleyball coach. And then I went to head softball coach, assistant athletic trainer, and I couldn't attend any fall practices, and I was still less than part-time. It's like our baseball program had a full-time head coach, had a full-time assistant coach, had their own facility. I actually hurt my back working our field to get ready for the game the next day. And I went to the AD at the baseball game and asked him if I could use the tractor to drag the field and stuff to get it ready, and how I turned the water on our new field. Well, the water is not hooked up, and no, you can't take that. We have a game going on here. You'll have to do it by hand. So I did. Well, that started all my back problems. And since I've had 4 back surgeries because I couldn't use the equipment we had because it was baseball equipment and couldn't use it for softball.
During your coaching careers, you probably saw seating and facilities explode. How would you characterize some of those things, and how do you continue the quest for more when sometimes it's ingrained in you? Deb, I think you mentioned this as well, to just be happy for what you have. How do you fight that confluence of factors? Anyone want to take that one on?
Well, and that's a big one. The one about just be happy, because I don't know how many times I was told that by administrators. So it's got to start with the administration. One, we need all of our athletes to have equal playing fields from the get-go, meaning your coaching staff, your equipment, your fields. So that's where we're sorely missing out, is by our administration. They're not fighting for us. And it's not just the men. I mean, I had female administrators who were like, oh my God, you have so much more than I ever had. Yes. It's like, but that's not where we're at. That's right. Not where we're at. We are right here, right now. And our baseball players and our softball players talk to each other all the time because they support each other. And the baseball players, oh, you get our sloppy seconds. They were quoted saying that. And they were saying that to their friends, on the softball team. So it starts there, just with, you're all important. You all pay your tuition and fees. You all, so, and if 55% of your student population are women, then shouldn't we have 55% more opportunities on that university campus? But a lot of people don't see it that way. So definitely that's where it starts. Deb, I know you have a lot on that too.
Yeah, it does. It starts there. And, I've played in 2 different conferences at Ithaca College. And I feel the inequities are in the facilities and in the support and the salaries, but just the overall support of the programs. And I went to my first Liberty League conference meeting, a few years back, and after being in the Empire 8 and was sat there, and one of my former players and assistant coaches was coaching at another Liberty League school. And so we just started talking about when we start the schedule, because we were starting so late in April. I was like, jeepers, we don't have any time to make up games late in April. I go, why don't we start a week earlier? And I just got crushed, and I got crushed by my player and former assistant. We don't have the support you have. We don't do that. I'm just like, I get that. I get that night. I guess I will never apologize for having the support, but I am angry that you don't have that support. And it is not right. What we do and what is done for us, I think, is the right way to do it. And I don't get why other programs and other schools can't support their programs at a high, if you're going to be a collegiate I always feel this, if you're going to be a collegiate program, look like a collegiate program across the board, all programs. And that was something I'd always say, it's something I just believe. It's like, look like it, let's support it. Kind of like Willie said, Willie applied for my position back in the day. And this is back when she was at Montclair, and Montclair had 2 fields, two lit fields back in the day. And we had a grass field that we were playing on, which was the field hockey field. And then they would carve out the bases and the mound and the batter's box for softball. And I don't know why you didn't take the job, Willie. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get why you didn't want to take that.
Because I knew you were a better candidate.
We couldn't like use fall ball, like well, I was volleyball, but my kids could not hit in the cage because it was right next to the field hockey field. And the field hockey coach didn't want the pinging of the bats while they were practicing. So it was just like all these different things were just so weird. It's just, I just look back at everything that, the growth that I've experienced just at Ithaca College, over the last, that was I'm talking 1990. We were on grass, 1991, we were on grass still. I guess for some people that might sound like it was yesteryear, but that's just yesterday,
It really is.
And we couldn't host regionals. We had to go to Eastern. We were the top team in the region. We couldn't host because we had a grass infield. So that's when our associate AD at the time said, we're in the middle of a big lawsuit here because, they're on grass and, they can't be the program that they could be because of our facilities and all that stuff. So that's,
I remember the meeting at the NFCA with a bunch of people saying, why should we let those programs hold us up from moving forward with our facilities? We need to put in the rules. I was at Tennessee one year as an NCAA rep, and we had shared bullpen. So the visitor pitcher and the home pitcher were Monica Abbott was warming up to Michigan's pitcher at a super regionals. And finally, I kept saying, this can't happen. We can't host here. Louisville has a great field. And we're hosting at Tennessee and they are on a Parks and Rec field. And we didn't even have bathrooms for the athlete, and that was in the 2000s. So you're saying the 90s, it was still happening in 2000.
I guess I got to thank you, Willie, for putting the rules in because it made Ithaca a little bit better.
No worry,
I just remember going over to the bullpen.
UCLA still doesn't have a visiting locker room, so it's they're in the.
Oh, that's a whole other argument. The locker rooms.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Yeah.
It truly is. Well, and that makes me think of the story, Deb, of Elaine Sortino building a dugout so that they can host. I mean, physically building a dugout so that they could have the opportunity to host and just things that it wasn't that long ago. It wasn't that long ago, and so. Yeah. And part of you thinks, how was that okay? And the other part of you thinks, well, maybe we really have come, a long way. It's pretty tough.
Only because of Elaine Sortino and people like Elaine Sortino who battled and fought.
Yeah. Those were the strong
and built it with their own hands.
The strong women that was like, no one's going to help me get it done. I'm going to get it done myself. And unfortunately, that's how a lot of it worked back then. You hear some of the stories and it's like, okay, I'm going to find a way to get this done. Margie Wright talking about fundraising and, things that she needed to do, in her facility and, to get things going. And the staffing, you're talking about just even staff issues. I think that's huge right now too, because, not having enough assistant coaches compared to some of the other sports, having our extra assistant, and that's the same story is like, well, some of us can't get it. Well, does that mean that we should
hold everybody else
have
back?
Opportunities for other women coaches out there to get started because someone else can't have it? That's a huge issue too.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I always loved it because it gave me the opportunity to say, look, we can have another person. We need to do this because that puts us. I remember the year we went to nationals, and for one, and I'm hoping that our complaining about the facility that we were on helped change the Division III mentality about facilities, because it was at Elmhurst College, and I know they've changed things a lot down there, but I mean, this was in '88. Sheilah, you were there because we played each other. They had telephone poles inside the playing field. there were no bleachers on the third base side. There was a tree hanging over into the playing field. And it was like, we went to warm up and my pitcher's out there and she's just like, what the heck is this? And I go out there and it was a little league pitching mound. And it's like, this is an illegal pitching mound, right? They're like, no, that's what we got to use. It's like, no, it's not.
It's the same for both teams.
And it's like, it was like, this is a Division III championship. Like, really? Like, we're playing on this? And then the trains are going by and the planes are flying over. And it was like, this is like trains, planes, and automobiles. I don't know if this is a good situation. But, hopefully our complaining helped get it so it was like, no, we need to have better facilities for our championships. And I know early on like that, it was a struggle to find places to host. But it was like, you got to look at a facility because this is not championship worthy for anybody. I mean, it wasn't championship worthy for a youth league, let alone an NCAA Division III championship. But I think, some of those things that were put in actually helped me try to push even harder to try to get some of those things for my program, because when I was asking before, it meant nothing because it wasn't written down anywhere. But at least now I had something in writing that I could take forward to our AD and say, it's right here, it's in black and white, this is what we got to do. And most of the time it didn't help, but at least I had something in writing to back it up of what I was asking for. So I think, that part of it helped. But yeah, you just got to keep pushing.
Yeah. One thing we hear from a lot of coaches is they're scared. You go to your athletic director, you complain, you go to the Office of Civil Rights on campus, you're going to be terminated, you're going to be blackballed, you're going to be, and we've seen coaches like Margie Wright, go to the mat and file the lawsuit and win the lawsuit and still deal with, fallout and different things that come with that. What advice would you give to active coaches who are trying? There are a lot of things they want to do. But to your comment a lot earlier, Sharon, they need the benefits and the salary and they would like to stay in the profession, which can sometimes be difficult. Marge, haven't heard from you in a little while. You want to take this one first?
Well, yeah, I will. I'm just wondering if with the culture we have right now with the Olympics and student athletes speaking out about mainly the mental issues that are going on, if this isn't a good time to try to empower the student athletes to come forward with some complaints about Title IX or filing Title IX grievances, that maybe they would be listened to more than a coach might. Because I think it's kind of student athletes are what we're all about. And maybe we just need to educate them of here's how you go about it. Here's the things you should look for if you feel like you're being discriminated against. Because I don't know how many of them know that much about Title IX. It's been a long time ago. And all they know is, well, it gave them more opportunities. But, so that'd be my recommendation. And the second one would be to educate our male coaches. I think there's still some out there that when they travel, they get a room for themselves and the other male head coach, they get their own rooms, but their female coaches have to share a room together, just little things like that. So maybe educating the men to help us more. And then the student athletes, getting them more involved in what's impacting their actual student athlete experience. So that'd be moving forward. I think we need to look at what can we do now and make a plan of what and how we can continue to move forward.
I agree with Marge. I mean, I always wanted more softball people to be on committees, NCAA committees, because I think if you have these people that have the knowledge of softball, they can move us ahead a little bit more. But it seems like basketball people were always on there. And so I think the more softball people we can get on committees, the better off we are. I also hope that one day, I mean, and I think this is happening, and I've been hearing it in the Olympics that, this player's mother, was in the such and such Olympics or whatever. And I think as we go forward, I think there are going to be more women who played sports whose children are now playing sports. And so I think that's got to help us down the road, I would hope.
Yes. And retired coaches. I know a couple of the coaches at programs that I was at have asked me, hey, can you go talk to the administrators or the Equal Opportunities Office and let them know what, and I was like, I'd be happy to, because they can't do anything. They can't take my retirement.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
And so it was easy for me to go in. I said, just write down the things that you want me to address and I'll go at it.
Mm-hmm.
Willie, you're not going to be retired for long. You're going to get a side hustle after coaches start listening to that.
This Ameritide group is going to be busy now.
Yeah.
Well, wheels are turning, Lacy Lee.
I like walking.
What else? Only a couple more minutes left with you all. This has flown by, but what are we missing? What would you like to add to that question, or what have I failed to bring up that you think really needs its own due here?
Let's not be satisfied. Let's keep moving forward every day.
I think as Marge said too, like these student athletes don't know what Title IX is, the current ones, and that they need to know. And that's how they can move forward, I think, and get more. It was funny, many years ago, we had Christine Grant speak at the NFCA National Convention as a keynote speaker. So we sent this intern that was working at the convention to pick her up at the airport. And so here comes Christine Grant back in. She goes, she doesn't know what Title IX is. And we're like, oh no.
Oh no.
So that was the wrong person to send. But
yeah, I was going to say, I know I'm talking to some of the high school kids because I get a little more time at times with some of them being in the athletic training room to just have conversations and through the years, and I'd say something about Title IX and they kind of look at me and I'm like, you don't know what Title IX is? I said, Title IX is why you have youth basketball since you were 4 years old, why you have traveling teams, why you have, 5 different uniforms for basketball and you have practice uniforms and all that stuff. I said, you need to find Title IX and read about it because that's why you have what you have. If I had the opportunities that you have right now when I was your age, wow, it would have been a whole different story. But I said, we didn't even have, I had like one basketball camp to pick from when I was in high school. One. And, it was like, well, I guess I'll go to that one because there aren't any other ones. And, and surprisingly, my parents let me go because that cost a lot of money back then. And not compared to these days, but, I think it's just that whole thing of they just kind of laughed. And I said, no, you look up Title IX and next time you come in here, we're going to talk about it. And they did. And they're like, wow. And I said, yeah. I said, I lived through that. I said, I went through that. And I said, don't ever take it for granted. Go get it. If it's what you want and it's the right thing, you have to keep pushing for it.
Well, ladies, truly, this has been so much fun. We should probably schedule a follow-up because I'm sure there are many things that we didn't get to, but we do expect to see all of you at headquarters when you are in Louisville very soon for your annual get-together. We'd love to host you for lunch or a happy hour or whatever it is that you would like to do. It would be our pleasure to do that. So, but thank you so much for taking the time and sharing the stories. And someone that's listening, I really encourage you to contact any of these women for more information or questions, or if you have an idea, we can definitely get you contact information for them if you can't find it on your own. But thank you again so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank
for
you.
having
You.
All right.
Thank you.